Welcome back. An increasing number of major metropolitan areas in the United States are rethinking the value of maintaining and expanding several of their major arteries into the city core versus their removal and uniting the neighborhoods that were destroyed under the guise of urban renewal projects and interstate highway projects of the 1960s and 70s. Ken is the king of run-on sentences here.
You'll survive.
You may be surprised to learn how those conversations are turning out. And I did read an article, I think it was Cleveland, where part of the infrastructure bill, they were paid to remove a highway, and it created something like 25,000 jobs for people who lived there that were particularly affected by this too.
It is a known fact that in almost every case in a major metropolitan area, that when an interstate was built from the 50s to the 70s, that it went through poorer ethnic neighborhoods, dividing up the very livelihood. It happened right here in Des Moines. Wiped out the whole core, what used to be the black neighborhood. It doesn't exist anymore. In the case of Minneapolis, they said, let's rip out one of the major interstates that cross Minneapolis-St. Paul, which is Interstate 94. Well, it's not coast to coast, but it is a multi-state highway that goes through the middle. Their argument is the neighborhoods that it damaged, to repair those, they've got the kind of infrastructure, they've got belts around their city, 494, 694, that they could divert traffic and maybe just revert the surface streets to bring people into the city. If you're not coming into the city for the city, but you're just driving through, you should be diverted around the city.
Yeah.
You know, one which would not put neighborhoods at risk. Because in the case of Minneapolis, they've got a whole bunch of data that shows lower life expectancies for people who live near the freeway, lower incomes for people who live near the freeway. The chances are if you live next to a freeway in Minneapolis, St. Paul, you don't even own a car. And that does not necessarily mean because you have access to public transportation. For them to reimagine this, how things have changed, the Minnesota Department of Transportation is actually listening, although the state legislators who are funding these projects are not all on board about ripping out 94. And say that's probably not going to happen. What they are pushing for is that as they reimagine this highway, as they are looking to improve throughput, traffic flow, and everything in the years to come, they're actually got an agreement not to add any more lanes to that road. And when you get down into St. Paul and into Minneapolis, it would be horrifically expensive to do that. Because they just had a project about maybe 5 or 6 years ago where they redid 35W coming from the south into the city. It was a mess. It took years. And no telling how many neighborhoods that it took out. When we redid in our community Interstate 235 20 years ago, the DOT for that project took out an additional 120 homes and businesses were removed, were bought, knocked down in order to handle this road that was built and rebuilt, actually. And it took them a number of years to do it. I think it took about 7 years, all told, to do it.
I just read an article recently about the infrastructure bill that was passed and how, in a lot of ways, it's not going to help. 80 to 20%, like the highest byline of the spending bill, the infrastructure bill, the $110 billion, goes to new roads and highways.
And that is the problem with federal thinking. We've reported that here. For federal money usually goes for new roads. A lot for new roads. It's easy to get federal money to build a new road.
And they did try. To give credit, they did try. A lot of people did try to put as a priority fixing old roads instead of building new roads, but it got thrown out.
The problem is, we're building all these roads, but people don't realize at some point in the future, you're going to have to pay to fix it. Bridges, pouring new cement, asphalt, drainage, all that stuff's going to have to be fixed as it breaks down over time. We've reported here last week about how all this traffic, particularly heavy truck traffic, beats it to death day in and day out. The tonnage that it's subjected to every single day. Did you know that a federal interstate, that the cement required federal standards, federal highway standards, they're pouring 18 inches deep? Your average road is 12, and even then it's getting beat all to death? And 18 inches of concrete, 18 inches, a foot and a half.
And generally we spend like 4 to 1 on new roads compared to public transit.
I think someone would say there was 40,000 something bridges were classified as deficient.
Oh yeah, Iowa's the worst too. Mm-hmm. Like literally the bottom of the list.
Mm-hmm. Yet, there's money to build a new road. You want to build a new road. I was just on a new road I didn't even know existed in our community. They had talked about extending a Veterans Parkway. And I thought it was still a pipe dream. Wife and I was out yesterday driving around. We stumbled on the extension about 5 or 6 miles, and it ends, ironically enough, in the middle of nowhere, paved all the way to the end. And it's a development that's going to be a high-priced, high-class development when it gets built out in the next 10 years.
I can't even get a sidewalk to the park across the street from me.
Yeah. And this road's built out 4 miles with nothing. Cement, 1 foot deep, 2 lanes wide, built out to the middle of nowhere.
The point of this is, as we can reimagine some of these things. I was listening to a podcast recently where I think it was a project for a school. They wanted to try and take out an unnecessary road and see what they could do with it. And sure enough, they actually were able to remove the asphalt and they were able to plant it with all the stuff that didn't exist before. And one of the teachers asked the kids there, he said, what did you learn about this? And he says, I felt dumb after, like, this kid should automatically be like, go to college or something. But he said, asphalt is not permanent.
There you go. Neither is cement.
Yeah.
We poured it down, we can break it up.
Yep.
Boston did it almost 30 years ago, the Big Dig. They buried a part of a major thoroughfare that separated the city from the ethnic Italian North End. Planted nice surface streets and biking ways. Totally changed everything. It was so quiet. Not to mention the amount of pollution that dropped, the amount of noise pollution that dropped, and the overall health and quality of that area of the city.
That's what Paris is trying to do. It's not to say we know and understand in rural areas, driving will remain similar, but when it comes to city areas where there's already a ton of opportunity for biking and walking, we should try and encourage that as much as possible.
And reuniting neighborhoods. It damaged a lot of culture.
Absolutely.
Because they decided to put a road there. No telling how the cities could heal with rethinking all of these roads in the inner core, regardless.
And the smog that they were subjected to,
Absolutely.
the tailpipe emissions.
Absolutely. Noise pollution, air pollution, a whole bunch of quality and health issues, not to mention increases in asthma next to these roads.
Absolutely.
Yep.
They may be late to the party, but they are not.